Okay, so this morning what we're gonna do is I'm gonna go through some pictures of World War I trenches with you. So World War I is often referred to as the Trench War, and so I'll give you an idea of what that looked like, and we'll take it from there. So right in front of you now is just a map, giving you an idea of the alliances. So anybody that was green fought together. Anybody that was yellow fought together, and the purple countries were neutral, so they technically were not involved in the war. And you could see this screen. There's a couple dotted red lines. That's where most of the fighting happened. There's a box on the left side of the war, or on the left side of the screen in France and Belgium, and that's where almost all of the fighting took place in that box. And so, for fighting to happen over 4 years and to be just in that little area, it means that there was not a lot of movement, and trenches are the main reason why. So this is a sketch of what a typical trench system would look like. So all the way on the left, you have something called no man's land. That's the area between the two trenches. Machine guns, when they're aimed across the landscape, if somebody comes out of their trench, they're an easy target. And so where you would want to stay is in the trench. You want to stay in the hole because bullets are going to go over your head. And so what you would do is where it says frontline trench, there was a 2 week rotation. You would spend 2 weeks on the front line, then you would rotate all the way to the back to the reserves, and then every 2 weeks you would move closer and closer to the front. And so you tried to stay underground the entire time, as it would be easier to stay alive. So you can see these guys are hanging out in the trench. And again, bullets are going to go right over their head. However, artillery shells coming in from over top could be dangerous. This right here gives you an idea what will happen when it rains. And so your socks, your shoes are constantly wet. And if you've ever been in a bath or a pool for too long and your hands start to wrinkle up, that's the same concept. And what would happen is it would lead to this, and I know that's kind of gross, and I'll get off it quick, but what's called trench foot. So the foot on the left is going to have to be amputated. Essentially, what happens is your foot rots out from the inside. It rots away. Water creates mold and rot, and so it does that to your skin. And so you can see these guys standing in shin to knee deep mud. Socks are constantly going to be wet, and when you're like that for weeks on end, it can lead to trench foot and having your foot amputated. Um, so this one, kind of a newer trench, we could tell because it's not deep. The deeper the trench, the more support in the trench. Usually means it's been around longer. So like you can see this one, they have some wood there. Their rifles are pointed into no man's land. They got some dugouts that might help them. This is a German trench that's looking over top. Again, a newer one. It's not that deep. You can see here, this is a good picture of a lot going on. So these are Germans. The guy in the foreground has a gas mask on. Gas made its appearance in this war and was scary for everybody because you couldn't see it coming, couldn't smell it until it was too late. In his hands is a German grenade or a potato masher that he's going to get ready to throw at incoming troops. And then the guy behind him is using a machine gun at the incoming troops. So here's some soldiers, and what they did is they would actually dig into the ground inside the trench to create little pockets or cubbies that would protect them from artillery fire. So you can see them hanging out there. Um, Here's a trench that's been here for a long time. You can see it's reinforced with wood. There's a guy sleeping in the foreground. He actually is sleeping on steps, and there's one guy meant to keep watch. That way, if the enemy's coming, they can alert everybody else. So here's a colorized photo, and the guy in front of us in the foreground, he's actually using a periscope. So it's a system of mirrors that enables him to see out into no man's land to see if the enemy's coming. There would be snipers constantly looking at the other trench, so you didn't want to stick your head over the wall. That guy in the back is kind of close, because if you stick your head over, a sniper might get you. So these guys are actually there's no radios yet, so they're sending messages via pigeon. So they're writing messages and then they're attaching it to a bird, and then the bird will fly back to the command post and report to the commanders what's going on. So this is a picture of no man's land. So this would be the area between the two trenches, and it's just a wasteland of artillery shells, mud. Trees are completely destroyed. Foliage is all gone, and then it would be just littered with bodies. Again, once one side would attack, they all come running out of their trench. Now they're exposed, and then the machine guns just mow them down. So you'd have these wood planks you try to put through no man's land so you could escape the mud, but you really couldn't. It was just everywhere. These are French soldiers. You can see their blue uniforms. They're not great camouflage, but once you get some mud and dirt and stuff on there, it would be okay. But why we show this one is the guy in the center. You can notice that there's a black man standing in the center, and why we show this is because the French, they didn't segregate their military. So if you could fight, he was probably from one of the African colonies that they had, and so if you could fight, they would take you. There's a group that we talk about, the Harlem Hellfighters. They were an all-black fighting group from America. And once they got over to France, the American military gave them entirely to the French military and said, they're yours, do what you want with them. And as I said before, people would spend usually 14 days on the front line. The Harlem Hellfighters spent 191 straight days on the front line. But they were argued like the most decorated American group from the war. And had they been white, a bunch of them would have received some of the highest honors that our military has to give. But unfortunately, 1917, 1918, black Americans were not receiving equality at all in America. This gives you an idea of a city completely bombed out by artillery, but you notice most of the stuff is still being moved by horse. So there's soldiers sitting on some planks that they're hopefully going to use to get across no man's land, but gives you an idea of the mud. There again, German soldiers hanging out in the mud, and they'd be really well camouflaged. I mean, if you're running across no man's land, you're not going to see them. But what you notice is the machine gun is a two-man job. You have a guy who's got to feed the ammo in, make sure it's staying cool, and then the person who's doing the shooting. And they both have their gas masks on. This man's trying to draw attention from a sniper by using his helmet on a rifle, see if they can figure out where he is. These are wood heads. Actually, people would make these, they would whittle these out of wood and then put them on top of the trench to see if they could draw enemy sniper fire. The head in the center with the mustache and the hat, that's an officer. That's what officers would look like. So they figure if they did that, then they could, that would be a easier target or a better target for the sniper. It's just an artillery shell going off, but just give you an idea of the trenches. You can see all the barbed wire on top. That's another line of defense. You can't just run straight in. You have to cut through the barbed wire. You have to take your time, and they can, the enemy can hear you cutting the barbed wire, so it'll take a while. So this is a little cartoon where, guys going, what they say, over the top. He's going across no man's land to attack the enemy, and the bullets are coming, and the guy behind him saying, I'll hold the ladder for you. Most of the time, you would get about 10 yards before you got hit, which isn't far at all. And that's why this war, there was no mobility because of the trenches. The enemy knew you were coming. They had a bunch of machine guns lined up. They can fire 600 shots a minute. Guys are running across at you. You mow them down. More guys come, you mow them down. And then it's your turn to run across. And so it was really a waste of life when they were running across no man's land. So these guys are going over the top, and they're just going to run at the enemy trench and try to overwhelm them. Same thing here. So this is post-battle. You can see that there is a German trench. So the Germans are sitting in the back, and then there's some, looks like that Americans in the front, in the foreground. And so they'll have to clean those bodies out, and then we dig the trench. Same thing here. It's after a battle, and you have to get your defenses set up, and the enemy isn't going to give you a break. So you have to work around the bodies and try and get rid of them. Same thing there. This is actually a soccer match. In the first, I think it was 1914, the first winter, there was a Christmas truce. So all sides of the war, all parties took a break of fighting for Christmas. And since nobody was shooting, both sides walked out of their trenches and they met each other in no man's land. And the British and the Germans actually played a soccer match against each other. And you can see it here. After this, though, the commanders decided that they no longer wanted the soldiers meeting because, like, the next day after playing soccer with one another, they're talking, they're laughing, they're exchanging food, cigarettes, right? Then the next day, it's okay. Now try to kill that person. And so you don't ever want to view the enemy, or that commanders don't ever want you to view your enemy as a person. They want you to view them as an animal or something that's easy to kill. And if you meet them the day before and they're showing you pictures of their wife and their kids, and then you play soccer, and then the next day it's okay, shoot that person, it's a little bit more difficult. Rats were a huge problem in the trenches. You can see this guy has all these rats caught, mainly because they had unlimited food source. The amount of dead bodies, dead horses, everything just laying around, they could eat, and there would be nothing to stop them. So you can see there too, more dead rats that they caught. This was something the French tried to create. It was a rat bed, which would be rat-proof bed, but it's not practical. You're not going to have those on the front lines, and maybe a commander would have it, but not often. So these are the trenches today. You can actually go, and it's still there to a point because they were dug so deep, and so you could go tour them and get an idea of what it would look like in France. And this one's interesting because you can see all the holes. Those are artillery shell or bomb craters. All right, so you notice the trenches; they're never straight lines. You didn't want a straight line because somebody could come in. If an enemy comes in and could look straight down the row, they know every single person that's in that trench. If you have corners and turns, they have to work slowly because you never know if there's somebody waiting around the other side. So that's a bigger picture of it, and you can still see all the bomb craters from the trenches. And there's another picture. People coming in. This is actually an explosion that left that hole. So what happens is you can see the blue lines are the British trenches and the red lines are the German trenches. So in some places, like at the top of the screen, they're really close together, and then in other places they're far apart. But what you would have is tunnelers. You would have people that would actually dig underground from one trench system to the other, put a whole bunch of TNT, C4, dynamite, whatever it was, under the enemy trench, and then blow it up from underneath. And so you can see that's what happened. That's that explosion, that picture. And just to give you an idea, can you? Oh, hold on. Right there is a car. So there's a car parked there, and then that gives you an idea of the size of the hole that left. And so then, as soon as that explosion goes off, the other side will attack. So that's a little bit about trenches, some pictures just to give you an idea, and then we'll talk about weapons at a later date.